Every student learns the same story. Christopher Columbus wanted a shorter and cheaper route to Asia, so he sailed west, only to accidentally discover America. It's neat and logical, but that's not the complete truth. Europe had been trading with Asia for over 1,000 years before Columbus was born, importing silk from China, pepper from India, and cloves from the Spice Islands. These goods had been moving through well-established routes, so the question is, why did Columbus set out to find a new sea route to India? Why did Europeans in the late 1400s suddenly risk lives, ships, and fortunes on a route that no one could prove existed, across an ocean no one had ever crossed? They gamble when the system they depend on stops working. To understand why Columbus sailed, we have to first understand the world that existed long before his voyage, where the rules of trade, power, and control had already been written. Before the 15th century, the global trade revolved completely around the Mediterranean, the Middle East, and Asia. Goods moved in stages. Asian producers sold to regional merchants. Those merchants passed goods through the Islamic world, and from there, they entered the Mediterranean, where European traders bought them at a markup. It was slow, expensive, and layered, but it worked. European kingdoms didn't control it. They depended on it. Italian city-states like Venice and Genoa didn't grow rich because they produced spices, but because they controlled the final step of the chain by negotiating access to trade goods, paying fees, and passing costs across Europe. There was just no reason to cross uncharted oceans until one city changed hands. In 1453, the Ottoman Empire captured Constantinople. This was more than the fall of just a city. It was the takeover of the world's most important trade gateway. Constantinople controlled the Bosphorus Strait, the narrow passage connecting the Black Sea to the Mediterranean. Whoever controlled it controlled the flow of goods between Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. Even before capturing Constantinople, the Ottomans were a major player in global trade. However, the sea route through the Bosphorus offered a faster and more efficient alternative, with ships carrying larger quantities in less time and cost. But when the Ottomans captured the city in 1453, they were able to create the ultimate monopoly over both land and sea trading routes. Although major powers like Venice and Genoa could negotiate favorable terms because they had long-established trading relationships, fleets, and diplomatic leverage, smaller kingdoms like Portugal and other city-states like Florence or Pisa were squeezed out due to increased taxes. Europe's trade didn't stop, it just became a lot more expensive. This financial cost pressured states to look for direct alternate routes to India, China, and other empires. Portugal was the first state to search for alternatives, and under Prince Henry the Navigator, Portuguese ships hugged the African coast, exploring rivers, capes, and unknown islands, and ultimately finding an alternate route to India. Their goal was clear: reach Asia without passing through Ottoman or Venetian hands. The Portuguese had decades of experimentation and were able to successfully bypass the Bosphorus, establishing coastal city-states like Goa on the Indian subcontinent. Goods from as far as China and Japan would be traded in these cities and were then transported to Europe by the Portuguese. This new model allowed the Portuguese to become a maritime superpower and offered a blueprint to the rest of Europe for bypassing Ottoman control. Christopher Columbus did not set out to discover a new continent. His goal was to find an even faster route to India and other Asian trading hubs than the one Portugal had discovered. He believed he could reach India by sailing west, a gamble based on a miscalculation of the Earth's size. His maps underestimated the distance by thousands of miles, and he completely underestimated the scale of the Atlantic Ocean. Columbus first pitched his plan to the Portuguese court, but they refused, recognizing the voyage as too risky and likely to fail. Rejected repeatedly by other European courts, he finally found interest in Spain. Spain, under Ferdinand and Isabella, expelled the Muslim rulers, establishing Christian authority after centuries. They desperately wanted a share of the Asian spice trade. Funding Columbus was a relatively low-cost gamble with potentially massive returns. If he succeeded, Spain would bypass middlemen. Columbus did not reach Asia. Instead, in 1492, he landed in the Caribbean, first touching an island in the present-day Bahamas, which he named San Salvador. Believing he had reached the outskirts of India, he called the local inhabitants Indians, and assumed each island, Cuba, Hispaniola, was part of Asia. On Hispaniola, he established La Navidad, the first Spanish settlement in the New World, using the wrecked Santa Maria and supplies to house the crew. He and his men encountered gold, fertile land, and new crops such as maize, tobacco, and cacao, resources completely unknown to Europe but immediately seen as economically valuable. European maps were redrawn to include these islands and the mainland of Central and South America, and trade routes began shifting focus from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic. The Caribbean became Spain's gateway to a new empire, and over the next decades, Spain established colonies across the Americas, extracting silver from Potosi, gold from Mexico, and other resources that funded European ambitions. One of the most valuable, yet often overlooked assets of the newly discovered Americas was its virgin fertile land. This land allowed European powers to cultivate crops like sugarcane and cocoa that were either impossible or prohibitively expensive in the Old World. The land could also support spices and other high-value crops, enabling Europe to reduce dependence on Asian trade monopolies. The success of the Spanish Empire in the Caribbean and Central America did not go unnoticed. By the early 16th century, other nations, particularly Britain and France, began organizing their own expeditions. After the United States declared independence and set sail into a world still controlled by the Ottomans, American ships operating in the Mediterranean were immediately exposed to the long-established rules of maritime power. North African states like Algiers, Tripoli, and Tunis, loosely affiliated with the Ottomans, demanded tribute for safe passage. The nascent United States initially refused, leading to captured ships, imprisoned sailors, and expensive ransoms. Diplomacy became urgent, and as a result, Morocco formally recognized the United States in 1777, followed by treaties with Algiers, Tripoli, and Tunis, requiring payments and concessions. Thomas Jefferson, the third U.S. president, served as the minister to France at the time, specifically studied Ottoman law and Mediterranean political structures to understand the stakes. Sultan Selim III officially recognized the United States in 1799, further cementing the legitimacy of the nascent country. Although the Ottoman Empire did not sail to the Americas, it was the single most important factor in the discovery of the Americas. Ottomans did not plant flags or govern new territories. Yet structurally, it shaped the conditions that made discovery inevitable. Without Ottoman dominance, Columbus might never have sailed, Spain might never have funded the voyage, and the Atlantic could have remained unexplored for centuries. The Ottoman Empire was essentially the secret founder of the Americas that history books often overlook. The discovery of America was essentially driven by the fact that the Ottoman Empire controlled Constantinople and key Asian trade routes, forcing Europe to look for new paths. In other words, one can say that even though the Ottomans never set foot in the Americas, they were responsible for setting in motion the chain of events that led to the discovery of the American continents.